What do we do now?
Well, with your permission, I would like to speak a little bit about somebody that perhaps you know, Sheila Fishman.
Well, you have my permission.
Sheila Fishman translated my first book, so she is the one who is responsible for all the good things that happened to me on this side of Canada, English-speaking Canada. I will tell you just an anecdote. It was my first tour of Eastern Canada, and it's a long time ago, I was in Cape Breton Island. I've been invited by a union of workers to make a presentation about my little book. And in the question period, after the reading, somebody stood up and said, let's say, I speak French and speak English. And I read your book in French. But you know, it's much better in English. So Sheila, thank you for this.
Great. I'm sure nobody will say the same of this book.
No, but I must say that I was really amazed in the way you adjusted to a military context, military language. You found the vocabulary, English vocabulary for the Navy things, for the weapons, old language. Wonderful. It's a great translation.
Well, that's due to my military background, which doesn't exist. But talking about some military language and talking about style. First of all, let me say that this book, for me, translating it, was not only a fascinating experience working with the language, but it was a whole education for me. Excuse me. I grew up in Winnipeg and studied what you usually study at school about Canadian history, and I knew about Wolfe and I knew about Montcalm, but all the way through history, I knew sort of the broad lines, but I thought of them as symbols or icons. I never really thought about them as human beings. And as I was working through this book and translating it, not only did I learn in great detail about what actually went on historically, but I really incrementally got to know these two very fascinating individuals as human beings with a life history, with a family history, with their quirks and their personalities as their destinies from initially very distant, but gradually converged, and without actually meeting face to face, they died on the same battlefield within a few hours of each other. And the book, in that sense, both in terms of the history and the biography, it has a cumulative force, because Roch is so meticulous about paying attention to the details and the specificities of what went on. And that must have been a tremendous, the research must have been stupendous that you undertook for that.
Yeah, I think it's, my publisher was telling me over 11 years working on that book. And I could have done something else, you know, traveling, swimming. Oh, I did that. But it was my full-time job working on that project. And I must say that I did not regret 1 second of the work I've been done. It's been enjoyable. And when I finished the book, I told my wife, like, you'll be free now. I finished the book. I said, oh, I'm sorry. You were never so interesting during that time. It's been a lifelong project, I believe, because, let's see, being born in a French-speaking environment, Quebec, So we learned very early in school that our country was taken, the French country was taken, stolen, I don't know, taken from under our feet by English. And they are not good people. And worse than that, they are Protestant. Never were told that my ancestors stole our dear country from the Aboriginal people. I never heard about that, because what I learned is that the Aboriginal people were so happy to see civilized French coming. So that was the context. And then, grade 1, the nun who was teaching us was Irish, speaking with a very strong accent. And she was not bad, she was very, very good. She taught me how to write, and she had such a pedagogical gift, you know. We're learning how to write. So, by example, the D, you write a D, there is a little belly of the D that goes there. I was a little bit dyslexic, and I would put the little belly on the other side. And bang! You learn. I love that. Okay, I got a number of those things, but I think I became a writer because of Sister Bridget, you know. She was not bad, she was extremely good. And then my father's cousin was working in New York City on an English family. And every year, at springtime, we would receive a box of clothes. And that year, I received in that box a wonderful raincoat. You know, one of those fishermen's raincoat with a hat, and it was in rubber. It was yellow, brilliant. It was not used. And with that, there were boots to climb in the mountain with like nails under, crampons under. I went to school in May. It was sunny, beautiful. I had my raincoat, my boots were making noise on the sidewalk, and my hat. I have a raincoat you don't have. So English, not so bad. I had a cousin. My mother has a cousin who was working in New York City. And he was coming for his vacation in summertime. He had a big car, and he had teeth in gold, golden teeth. Was not so bad, you know. My friend has, in his member of his families, who were working in Welland, Ontario. And my friend every summer would go to Welland, Ontario. And he had great vacation, much better than mine. So there was all those questions. And all that remained. I became an adult, and it was always there. Okay, how come? What we learn is not right. And I started to read. The first trip when I was in France was to cross the country on my scooter and go to in the area of Nîmes to visit the manoir where Montcalm was living. You know, trying to feel what it was. It's been a long time, you know, working on that project until I decided that I will write it.
In writing it, because this is a translator talking, I'm talking stylistically, you did all this research, but you are a fiction writer. You're used to being expansive and playing with language in various ways. And for this historical book, I think you must have had to restrain your impulses to break out all over and just follow wherever your fancy took you, because the book is extremely disciplined. It's extremely, to a degree, it's kind of just the facts, ma'am. You know what it reminded me of? This is crazy, but this is because it's a totally irrelevant thing. You remember when Norman Mailer wrote the Executioner's Song? Mailer, who always had this really expansive style, and he decided to write this nonfiction novel in which he restricted himself just to the facts of this case. It got nothing to do with your book, but it reminded me of it a bit because
it has a lot to do with my book, because this is one of my favorite books.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay,
I got that. I didn't know that. All right, so... But you know, I mean, you disciplined yourself, and I know you banked, and you use simple language, a lot of statistics, short declarative sentences all the way through, and gradually you get into it, but it develops this cumulative effect, which really pays off towards the end. But how did you live that? Did you find that experience of adopting this style for this book after having written all those fanciful fictions? Did you find it restrictive for you from time to time, or not at all?
I wanted to do an interesting book, because the information in itself, the information is so interesting. And my challenge was, how will I feed that information in an interesting way? So it's not a novel, but perhaps the tone, the way I write is like in a novel. But I wanted to make this information concrete, easy to understand, easy to follow. I wanted, if something was smelly, I wanted to suggest, to create the smell of the thing, or if it was noisy, the noise of the thing. I work on that, I work on my sentence. But on the whole, it was a lot of cuts, because I think I still have the pages of my manuscript. And I think it's something like this high. And it was cutting and cutting and cutting, synthesizing. And I wanted each sentence, to be readable, nothing abstract, because there is too many abstract books floating around. And I wanted to make it easy. So there is a lot of information. I would not recommend that you read on the same day 100 pages. You will not remember anything. But just take this like a good whiskey, and slowly, the chapter is short, and you go slowly, you think. There is a lot of humanity. It's not just cold information. You will see, by example, Wolfe writing to his mom, talking about the state of their health. Wolfe recommending a dentist in Paris for his mother, that type of thing.
Yeah, no, the petite histoire that you get in the book, and the idiosyncrasies of the two characters really do bring it to life. I mean, Wolfe's seasickness, for instance.
Yeah, this is an amazing one, This young Wolfe, Montcalm was a noble person. So your dad is a noble, his grandfather, his ancestor 200 years ago was a noble. So when you're a noble, you owe me something. What can you do for me? Wolfe was the son of a military man, and the father was saying, okay, in the military you can buy your rank if you're noble or if you have some money. But there is a chance for you, if you're not a noble, that you can grow up through your merit. And right at the beginning, we have two types of men in the military. Now, 13 years old, Wolfe's father was sent in a mission to Colombia, Cartagena, to seize the city. It was the beginning where suddenly the English government understood that they could now attack the Spanish because for some reason the Spanish were less powerful. It's time to go, we go. And Wolfe's dad invited his son, he had this privilege being a military man, invited his son to be part of the mission to Cartagena. So he went, they went on an island, because before leaving on the boat, they were gathering all their staff on an island. Why is that? To prevent people to run away, because people were running away. You know, the military was extremely tough, Navy was extremely tough, and not everybody wanted to do the trip, so they were running away. So being on the island, they would be kind of prisoner there until the boat is ready, and then you put them on the boat. So Wolfe is very proud at 13 years old to do that trip. His father is very, very proud also of his son. My son, the future officer perhaps in the Navy. What happened, the boat came, and before he went on the boat, he became seasick. And Wolfe was somebody, during all his life, he was seasick. The idea of a boat, you know, was making him just sick. So that's a little thing, a little detail, but it was always there for all his mission.
And yet he was going back and forth all the time on boats to do his
yes, absolutely.
job, but it was always agony for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This experience in Cartagena, it was a big disaster. They came in front of the city, all prepared with ladders, but they had the wrong information, and the ladders were too short for the walls. So they were just massacred. It was a disaster. There was, let's say, a navy and the land forces were almost enemy under the same flag. They were almost enemy, badly prepared. And for Wolfe, you know, they made a lot of fun about his seasickness in the school where he was going. You know, this big hero was supposed to travel but was sick, so he became kind of a victim. But it was, for him in his career, a very important experience, because his father talked about the reasons of this disaster. And the little one was saying, we should not make that mistake. There should not be enmity between the different four departments of the defense and all that. It was a learning experience.
Yeah. The two men with the very different backgrounds and many military experiences before they ended up in the New World and dealing with very different realities in terms of the way they were supported by their different countries. Wolfe had a number of frustrations, but Montcalm, of course, had to deal with the terrible waste and corruption in Quebec, and the lack of support from France itself. I got the feeling as the book went on, though, that they both, in a way, became very fatalistic. Is that true?
Yes, you know, Montcalm was in Quebec, and he could see the situation. The situation was really, really bad. I believe that France didn't know exactly what it wanted to do with that land in the cold. And in fact, you know, and it's a long story. Cartier had discovered Canada, in 1534, and it was difficult. There were many years. We had to wait until Champlain, 1608, for something to happen. And at the same time, France was a little bit more interested by Brazil, or more interested by Florida. France established itself in Florida, and it was finally spoiled. That project was spoiled not because of the Portuguese, but because of the French themselves. There was at that time this war between the Huguenots and the Roman Catholic in France, and that war came into Florida. And suddenly the French in Florida, instead of going on the beach, they were fighting about religious stuff, you know. So
the other thing that impressed me, and I guess this is common throughout history, is the role of le hasard, of chance in a lot of instances. The fact that when it finally did come to the long siege of Quebec and Montcalm holding out, not responding to the challenges of Wolfe to come out and fight so he could beat him, and winter was coming on, and it was very nip and tuck as to whether the English would be able to land before they had to return back across the ocean with the onset of winter. And in fact, as you wrote, many of the English really wanted to just to turn and go home, and were very concerned about this, and were very angry with Wolfe for continuing, for persevering. And the famous scaling of the cliffs is something that may or may not have happened. It was very nipping tuck. Like my question, looking at how close that was, in your opinion, suppose it hadn't worked. Suppose the English had not made it up the cliff, the battle hadn't taken place, and at that point they had to renounce the attack. What impact, long-term, do you think that would have had on the history? Because it seemed to me that even if that had happened, it was only a matter of time before the French would be defeated. How do you assess that yourself?
So I think that if Wolfe had not succeeded that time, you know, they would have come back the year after, you know, because there was a determination, strong determination under William Pitt to get America, to get installed in America. And they took all kinds of measures. By example, there was a problem with the military in what is now US and the establishment in London. And when a general from London will come on what is now American military, if there was in front of him a general, American general, this American general automatically will become a major. So it was degraded in a way. And that's how they were saying the Americans who knew how to fight in this continent, you know, but there was this philosophy that in America, Canadians or Americans, they were fighting like savages. They were not fighting in a civilized way. And our good friend Montcalm, by example, after his first victory, not far from here in Oswego, the fort of Oswego, he won the battle, he won the fort. Immediately, he wrote a letter to his Minister of Defense in France, apologizing to have fought in the savage way, apologizing for not having fought a civilized war. And if Your Excellency still want to give me some mission when I'm back in France, I promise solemnly that I will go back to our civilized way of fighting. So they were coming the woods, dressed in color, with music, top. Somebody was under the tree. That's how you...
You feel this conflict all the way through, eh?
Oh,
and in Quebec, the conflict between the French coming over and the Canadiens who were here already established, who had adopted in many ways the tactics of the native people. That was an ongoing ongoing point of contention between them.
Yes, there was a big conflict between the Governor General and Montcalm, who is the Commandant-in-Chief. A real big, they were hating themselves. They have piles of letters, reports, given to the authorities in France, once against the other. They would not trust himself. At one point, at the moment of the fight, Montcalm doesn't know exactly how much weapons and munitions he has, because the Governor General doesn't want to tell him. So that was the point where it was. Each of them were sending different ambassadors to the Minister of War, expressing the need for the new France. So perhaps that's one of the reasons, certainly one of the reasons why they lost, lack of communication. The Wolfe was attacking, and Montcalm was not receiving the whole information about what was taking place. And, that was quite an operation. I was reading in a very respected book by a respectable historian that Wolfe was a very weak strategist. That's not my impression after working. He was a very bright strategist. But the respectable historian is saying, Wolfe, he didn't know what to do. He was here, he was there, he was shooting there, he was attacking there, he was here, he was there, he was attacking far away. He was sending boats finally back to England. In my research, I found that Wolfe was a great reader of ancient story, military stories. And he was impressed by a story told by Xenophon, the Greek historian. And he talks about Alexander the Great being in India. And he has to cross a river. And on the other side of the river, there is the enemy with their army of people, an army of elephants. How do they get on the other side of the river? And Alexander the Great decided to work on the psychology. So suddenly, on his side of the river, he started to organize parties with his troops, drinking, games, Everything was a disaster on this side. Everything was a disaster. And the elephants were there waiting, waiting. Oh, finally, they would not come. At the moment that the elephants and the people were convinced that Alexander the Great would not come, he arrived during the night. So that's exactly what Wolfe did in Quebec City. Exactly that. He was looking like Messi. Nobody around him knew what he was doing. And the message was, this guy doesn't know his job, doesn't know his responsibility, he doesn't know what to do, he's a no good. There was Townshend, one of his assistants, you know, he was, those days, the military people were learning how to draw, because they had to draw plans, there was no camera, so they had to draw landscape and whatever. And one of those Townshend had a gift for caricature. And he started to caricature this poor, not very handsome wolf, you know, and putting his caricature on the wall and all that. Townshend even threatened to write a report and blame Wolfe for his indecision. He didn't know what to do. What he was doing, he was exploring the country. And he was doing an operation here on the east, one on the west. He was suddenly exploring here. It was looking like Messi doesn't know what to do. He knew exactly where to do. He had his plan, but he would not dare to tell even his officers his plan because there was a lack of trust. It's something that I learned. There was a lot of people on both sides, French or English, they will switch side. Some will cross the St. Lawrence River, by example, to be just pick up in an English boat, and vice versa. And everybody who was leaving his side was telling stories about what was happening. So on the night of the attack, beginning of September the 13th, the soldiers were there in their boat, not knowing what they would do until the moment some trustable officer will tell them to leave and start the operation. That was very impressive. And it's something you'll be able to follow in the book much more than in what I'm saying.
Well, but he did change his mind a lot, and he improvised. He had to be he was flexible. He had to be very nimble in revising his plans. He was. Because there were things that didn't work.
Very flexible and very bright. And he had a principle that you have to trust your luck if you are well prepared. And just a little example. He was convinced that a military man who is a winner doesn't win only because of his military qualities. Because of that. Wolfe was at the time 6'2". That was tall for those days. And he was not very handsome. He had red hair and all that. And he took lessons of dancing menuet in France. When he was he stayed in France for 1 year. He studied menuet. Why is that? Because a military person doesn't win only on military qualities. What he did, after his trip from France, he was appointed in Scotland. And it was a mission that he didn't want. It was like, he wanted to be a military, and his mission was to be a policeman. There was a kind of strike between the people who were working in the mills, something like that, and it was going very bad. He was, let's say, keeping the peace between people who were working on knitting mill, you know. He didn't want that, but he did the job. First, to start his mission, he organized a ball of menuet dancing. So some ladies wanted to dance, they brought their man. The man wanted to kill Wolfe, but they came and they danced, and nothing bad happened, and this thing grew. And then Wolfe, who was not a religious man, started to go to the office on Sunday to be seen, and his military assistants had to go to church too and to pray and do everything. It was a success in his mission. So that's how he was.
Yeah. Were these not, if I remember correctly, were these not the same people? Were they the Highlanders that you're referring to now? Were these not the same people that they had massacred at Culloden earlier?
No.
Oh, it's not the same.
It's not the same. No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
Not in that area.
It's been a while since I read the book. Although I think at one time he did, in another circumstance, try and reconcile or win over Highlanders that they had killed, because did he not after that?
Yes.
He did practice that in a different way. Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
yes, he went on the building roads, to kind of bring the people who were separated.
Kind of pacification.
Pacification.
Do you think we should read a little bit to just give a bit of a texture of particularly the way you handled some of the battle situations? Yes. I have one possibility. You may have another.
Yes. So which one?
The one I was thinking of actually was when they were not Quebec but Louisbourg or Louisbourg, when they attacked and managed to get the boats on shore at a point where Wolfe himself was ready to retreat, but something happened, and by chance they got on board. What do you have in mind?
About what you said, before the mission in Quebec City, the year before, 1758, there was the attack on Louisbourg, and Wolfe was not the main officer, but he was very effective. And when they started, the warriors started to get out of the boats to go on the land, the ocean was very, very bad. It was extremely rocky, extremely dangerous. And the gentleman who was the first to go and see the situation made a sign with his hat, moving the hat, saying, "No, no, no, don't come here." Wolfe saw that sign, and he understood, yes, it's time to go. So he jumped in the water, he climbed himself in something that was impossible to climb, and he succeeded, and then he was calling his men. And I think it's one of the reasons why they took quite an advance there.
Yeah.
I was to read something, just a short extract about Montcalm, education. Once Louis-Joseph de Montcalm had reached the age of 12 in 1724, he was enlisted with the rank of ensign in the Hainaut Infantry Regiment, where his father was lieutenant colonel. The tutor, who found that his pupil has a teacher, who found his pupil has an aversion to writing, was concerned for his future. I have been thinking about Monsieur de Montcalm's limited aptitudes and talent, he wrote to Montcalm's father. What will become of him? Where will he exceed? Get the next page. Reacting later to this verdict, Louis-Joseph de Montcalm wrote to his father, "In a few words, I pride myself on the following. 1, being an honest man of good habits, a virtuous and good Christian. 2, being a middling reader, knowing the Greek and Latin languages as well as most people in this world, mastering the 4 rules of arithmetic, having some knowledge of history, geography, and French and Latin literature, valuing sound judgment, even if I have it not, and cherishing in particular the sciences and art of which I am ignorant. 3rd, what I set above all else, obedience, docility, and wholehearted compliance to your orders and those of my dear mother, along with a deference for the counsels of Mr. Dumas, my teacher. 4, where the body is concerned, to take up arms and mount horseback as much as my meager talents will permit me. At the same age, Wolfe, oh, I told you that story. It's the story about being sick and on the boat from the first time. So.
But you're drawing a contrast there between the two.
Yes.
And what is the essence of that contrast that you're drawing between the two?
Oh, that's a tough question. I could not be nuanced enough, you know. What I would say, you know, Wolfe didn't have the old security that Montcalm have. He had to prove himself, to study, to learn, because he was not attractive, he was not sympathetic to anybody. He had to prove himself. And he became very demanding for himself. He was not receiving nothing, no free privilege, you know. He had to conquer everything. So he had to observe. He became observant, and he became very critical. And he was taking the risk to criticize somebody who should not have been criticized because of rank and all that. But he was standing his position after having thought about it. And all his life, he was trying to learn. I mentioned learning how to dance, but he was also learning how to fight with a sword, how to shoot, how to work on a horse. He was learning, reading constantly when he was not on the battlefield, or he was not in mission. He had in Scotland many winters where he had not much to do, and in those times he was learning music by his book. Everything he was learning, he was open to learn. And that was very useful in the real life, which was his combating life.
Yeah, and it reminds me that even after his death, his mother had to fight, and not successfully, to get him the proper recognition for his achievements as commander at Quebec. Is that not so?
Yes. Let's say Wolfe had the feeling that on that fight he will die. He was on the boat, and even before being on the boat, dressing very, very ceremoniously for the combat, putting on his uniform. He called during the night before going at the boat. There was a boat, and everybody was going to meet at the boat where there were 2 lights, and from there they would place the people in the different smaller boat. And Wolfe is thinking and is convinced, as Montcalm was also, that this fight will be the last fight of his life. And getting dressed with his servant, Wolfe took from his neck a little picture he had of Mrs. Lauter, who was his girlfriend, his second love, and he had promised to marry her. And he gave that little picture, painted picture, to his to one of his friends that the servant called, one of his friends that he had attended school with. And Wolfe gave this little picture of his girlfriend to his friend, and he said, after my death, when you go back to London, please give this picture to my girlfriend. So he had this feeling, and he was convinced. On the boat, is very thinking also about sad things, like, by example, some poem that he read, and he remember that, let's say, somebody who goes on a fight is probably going to his death. He was kind of sad until he went into action. And when he put his foot on the ground and started climbing, and it was not easy to climb, because I climbed that thing, I went to check, and I climbed that thing, and I had not my boost that I got from my cousin, but I had my running shoes, and I climbed that. It was not easy. It was high. It was steep.
I think they'd like us to take questions.
Yes, I'm sorry. We could have another hour, right? I mean, now you understand why this man is known as the greatest raconteur this country's ever produced. Bravo. I think we have time for like 2 questions. So, okay, the lady here. Just wait for the microphone, please. Do we have our microphones ready? There we go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What a fascinating conversation. Could you tell us a little bit about the similarities and differences of the reaction to your book in English Canada and French Canada?
In English Canada, the first review was a terrible, the worst review I ever had in my life. Really, really terrible. Now, I didn't pay much attention because the writer of the review did not understand the third sentence in the book. So if he didn't understand the third sentence, what about the rest? It was very, very bad. But let's say I'm trained for that, At some time you are like, I was to mention boxer. When I started the book, I took a personal trainer because I knew that I will work hard and I was sitting and reading. So I took a personal trainer that was pushing me to stay in good shape. And because of that, I met people with tattoos and big and wrestler. And I went to see boxer with those guys because I wanted to understand how they work, And so why am I talking about that?
I don't know, but that review, actually, that brings in a translation thing. That the one thing that came up towards the end of the work was the terminology to be used for the native people, because you were using the terms that were used then. In French, you were using the word sauvage. Couldn't use the word savage in English. That's a far more harsher nuance. So I use sometimes Indians and natives. And I think 3 times I actually used the word savages because they were really inside somebody's head. But the people at the publishing company got kind of cold feet about being politically correct at a certain point, and they were wondering if maybe we should use, the politically correct terminology that everybody knows today, which of course would have been, not really appropriate. So Roch wrote a little piece justifying the use of the terms he did, and he wrote it in his typically ironic way, saying that, if I can pick it out here, beginning said, "Blessed as we are to be living in an age when intolerance and racial prejudice have been expunged from the human spirit, it is perhaps difficult for us now to acknowledge that such sentiments existed in the past." That's how he started out. Very ironic. This reviewer took him at his word. He was thinking that Roch was actually saying that in this day and age we no longer have intolerance and racial prejudice. And 1/3 of the review attacked him for this terrible opinion. So that shows on what level that happened. That's neither here nor there.
You know, as a writer, you know, I'm telling about those days. Now, in those days, at the time of the fight, the native people, they were not aboriginal. They were not, I don't know. They were savages. That's how they were called. They would call them. Not only they would call them, but they would see them as that, you know, not civilized as we are, you know, we are French or whatever. And if I don't give that in my text, I'm not true. I have to give that reality. Even if I don't like the reality, it is where we are. So,
Yeah.
Alas, I feel badly doing this. I perhaps suggest that the conversation could continue at the signing table at the back, where both Don and Roch will be signing copies of the book.